Previously in Know Better, Grow Better. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes.
Now, let's talk about how the plants grow. We're going to talk about height, shape, growth rate, their behavior, and then how they spread. So, yes, you can have plants that are tall, medium, and short. And you can have ground covers that just go along the ground. So they're like really, really short. And then there are versions of plants that are dwarf versions versus the full size. That's very common in urban orchards where maybe you can't grow a full size cherry tree, but you can grow a dwarf. Or you don't have space to grow maybe you don't have space to grow a regular Joe Pye weed to attract all the butterflies and the pollinators, but you've got enough space to grow the dwarf Joe Pye weed. And so it's and just depends on how much space you have available, but there usually is some kind of dwarf version for almost all the plants that you might want to grow. The shape is important. You can have mounding plants. So here is our ground here. Here's our ground. Here's a mounding plant. It starts in one section and it just comes up and over. So the basic shape is like that. It's like a mound. You can have straight plants, like some ornamental grasses are similar to that, where they just grow up and straight. Some of the grasses will actually grow up and straight, and then at the edges, they'll come off like this. You can have vase-shaped plants, like that Joe Pye weed I mentioned is a vase-shaped plant, where the roots are all confined to kind of one area. But then the branches and all the flowers come up in like a fan, a vase shaped like this. This is typical for that Joe Pye weed. It's also typical for, you've seen this for stone crop, whoops, here it is. Stone crop slash sedum is in a vase. You can have triangle plants. This is kind of like a triangle plant, but sometimes there are plants that will grow like this, or they could be shaped like that. Or they could be shaped upside down than that, like this one. Or you can have meatballs. Please don't have meatballs or squares or rectangles. Please don't. But you could. But here's a meatball plant. Some plants, some shrubs naturally grow this way, and then sometimes people will sculpt them into certain shapes, like the meatball or the square or the rectangle, things like that. But that's going to make a difference when you go to design your garden. So an example would be if we looked at this Joe Pye weed here, underneath on either side of the Joe Pye weed, right here and here, we've got room to put another plant. Now we would want a plant that's going to fit in just in this area here. So we won't necessarily want the grass. We don't want the straight grass, it's too tall. We don't want the fountain grass that's flowing. It's going to bump into the Joe Pye weed, but we could put a mounding plant there, right? Or we could put something like a hosta would be like a mounding plant. That would fit there nicely, a hosta. And then it's going to have little stems with the flowers, but it's not going to run into it like the others would. And then, is this just for design? No, it's just for planning. It's for planning ahead of time. So you don't have to, you do the work ahead of time. You don't have to do the work later, or you don't have to hire me to come in and fix things that are growing in ways that you weren't prepared to have grow. Then there's a growth rate. Some things grow quickly, some things grow, they're medium growers, and some things grow slowly. You know, the annuals grow very quickly. The perennials, they take a long time to get established, and then once they're established, woof, now the growth takes off. The growth behaviors, some things stay inside boundaries that you set, like purple coneflower, that's pretty good. Yes, they're a native plant, but they're not rude. They kind of stay where you put them. They don't like spread all over the place. Or they're sprawling. Native asters are sprawling and mounding. They mound, but then they also kind of sprawl. They could sprawl along the ground if you don't have space for them to do their mounding shape. You could have some that spill over, like things that you put in like rock gardens or over the edges of beds. They can spill. And you can have some that climb. You've got a lot that climb like your vines. And then spreading. Here's the spreading part. That's really important to know about for any kind of plant. They can spread by seed, and they can spread in the wind by seed, dandelion. They can spread by seed like a sunflower. If you've ever had sunflowers in a bird feeder, and now whoop, you've got or sunflower seeds in the bird feeder, boss, black oiled sunflower seeds, and now boop, you got sunflowers. They spread by seed, and it's pretty easy. They can spread with roots underneath the ground, like crabgrass or common milkweed. The other thing is by the air, common milkweed, swamp milkweed, can also spread by air, just like the dandelion can. Or it could be a branch touching the ground and rooting. Forsythias are like that. So forsythia gets shaped into squares, hedges. They get shaped like that a lot of times. I've seen that. I've seen this before for forsythias. Please don't do that. It's not its natural shape, but I mean, you can if you want to. You can if you want to, but that's not how it's happiest because you won't get a lot of blooms. Forsythia are the yellow plants, the yellow shrubs that you see in they're first to bloom usually in the springtime. And when you see the forsythia in bloom, that's when it's time to cut your roses. That's always the guideline that I use where we live. Forsythia's habit is it starts off in one central area and it comes up and it comes up and it comes up. Forsythia's tends to do this. Is what it does. That's its kind of wild form. And mature forsythias that are allowed and pruned to stay this way are really, really beautiful. And they move in the wind. They lose their leaves in the winter time. They flower beautifully yellow in the springtime. But what they'll also do is if this branch right here is touching the ground, it will start rooting. And you'll get another plant, which, I mean, if you want more plants, that's great. If you don't want more plants, that's something to consider. And you might want to keep them trimmed so they're not touching the ground. Another thing that does that is tomatoes will do that. If you let a vine keep going along the ground. Squash will do that. Watermelon, they'll make roots from whatever is touching the ground. Grapevines do that. It's pretty common, where if it's touching the ground, then it will make more roots and it will reproduce itself. Okay.
Click on the video for the next portion of Know Better, Grow Better. And if you enjoyed this, share it with a friend and consider subscribing to the channel for more. Thanks so much for watching.